Carol Roth, the author of that book, You Will Own Nothing, which is ridiculous. How would you possibly bankrupt people so they would have to sell everything or couldn't afford it and have it taken away from them? I mean, you'll own nothing by 2030. Ha, 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 what a ridiculous idea. Hello, Prophet Carol Roth. How are you?
I thought I was a conspiracy theorist, Glenn, but I'll take prophet/conspiracy theorist.
Isn't it amazing, Carol? Every day I see something, just McDonald's. You go to McDonald's. This is how you have a country that owns nothing because they no longer can afford to buy anything. Anything.
Yeah, it's so frustrating when I read this in the media, the corporate press all of a sudden waking up and saying things like, oh, fast food in restaurants are more expensive than ever and people can't afford them. It's like, wow, that's a giant shock to me, who's been telling you this for years and years based on the fiscal and monetary policies of this country.
What's more frustrating to me is the fact that we know that they're wrong. We've seen that they're wrong over and over and over again. They're lying to us and saying we're conspiracy. And then when it turns out to be right, they announce that it's suddenly true and right. And then people go back to them for the answer on how to solve it. It's crazy.
Right. It's the arsonists who are burning down your house, and then they bring a water bottle and say, hey, I'm going to help put out the fire and rebuild it. It is frustrating, and the gaslighting when we're telling people what it is that they're going to experience or what they are experiencing from the Biden administration, from the press, saying, no, you just don't understand. You're just not smart enough.
Right.
When people are experiencing this every day,
right.
It's just like an extra gut punch.
Talk to me about Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. This was one of the biggest collapses during 2008. But if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't really taken that way because the federal government, we, the taxpayers, foot the bill for that one. So they didn't actually fail, but they did.
So do you remember the scene in After Trading Places when Randolph and Mortimer Duke went bankrupt, and then they pop up in Coming to America, and Eddie Murphy hands them this wad of cash, and all of a sudden Randolph says, Mortimer, we're back. I feel like this is the exact same thing that's going on with Freddie Mac, and certainly if it happens with Freddie Mac and it gains acceptance, it's going to happen with Fannie Mae. So right now, these two government-sponsored enterprises, based on what happened out of the Great Recession financial crisis, they were put into conservatorships with the FHFA as well as the Treasury. So they've been watching them and making sure that they don't do anything risky, right? Well, now, Freddie Mac had this great idea because people have so much equity in their homes. Let us go ahead and offer second mortgages. Now, you have to remember that these government-sponsored enterprises, Freddie Mac and, as well as Fannie Mae, the whole point of them is to, extend credit, make sure that people can get into housing. But second mortgages don't get you into housing. Those are consumer loans. Those are people taking money out of their homes and using them for whatever it is. And that equity is perceived equity, right? Because they haven't cashed out the house. They haven't sold the house. They haven't cashed out. So they don't have that guaranteed. They just think that it happens to be today worth this much money, and they put a loan against it. So
wait. Let me make a case for this because I did a lot of thinking on this a couple of years ago. Some people that may be good for. Other people, horrible. Or do you think it's always horrible?
Well, here's what it is. It's taking the money out of your home,
right.
The equity that you have, the ownership that you have,
right.
And saying, okay, no longer I have this ownership. Now I have the pile of cash. So what are you doing with that cash? Are you using it to reinvest? Because right now that's very expensive to do. We're not in zero interest rate environment. So, if you're paying even on a second mortgage, 8 or 9 or whatever percent it is, how are you going to get a better return on that? It seems to me that that is people taking their wealth, their ownership, and going and blowing it and spending it
That's what will
on
happen.
things.
That's what
Right.
will happen. I mean, second mortgages to pay down like a credit card at 25%. I'd rather pay 9 than 25.
Sure,
Right.
sure. But obviously, we would rather to use other money if we can to
Yes,
pay down
yes, yes,
25% than
yes.
taking down your ownership. So obviously, it is specific to everyone. But overall, I think we have to ask ourselves a few questions here. One, why is it that the taxpayers should all of a sudden back consumer loans? Why is it that we want to encourage more consumer debt spending, particularly during a time of inflation? And why do we want people to reduce the ownership, the equity in their homes?
May I guess?
And so,
May I guess?
sure,
Yeah.
please do, because I got to guess too.
Because I am a helper. And if you reelect me, I can help you with all of your troubles. But the other guy, he's not going to help you with that. I'll help you get a loan so you can do the things you need to do, invest in your business and pay down your loans. And a lot of people are struggling even to pay for food. So I'll help you.
Bang, 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 bang. We have an election around the corner. And obviously, we've seen Biden try to do this cancellation of student loan debt. And, that is not working out as well as he had hoped, although he keeps pushing it. So now, how do we make people who are maybe struggling financially feel like they're wealthier, feel like they have more cash in their hands? Oh, we'll let them take this, quote unquote, equity out of their homes, which is buying votes, which is increasing consumer spending, which pushes up the GDP, which we know is faltering based on last quarter. So all of these things make him look like the economy is doing better. By the way, also likely highly inflationary, that we're adding more consumer spending into the mix here. So this is being proposed
and hang on just
by
a second.
Freddie Mac.
Hang on just a second. And more inflation makes it harder for you to buy things later. You've got now a second mortgage, and you're going to be in the same situation you were in if you spend that money to do anything other than pay off very high interest rates. You take a loan out and do anything with it because this won't happen until after the election. I mean, you won't feel the effects, but I'm telling you, inflation next year is going to be insane. Do you agree with that?
Well, particularly if these programs that he's pushing continue, right?
Yes,
so
yes,
if FHFA comes back and says, sorry, we're not going to do this, which one of the things that's pretty interesting here, and it goes back to this election thesis, is normally when you have a rule like this that pops up, there's a comment period. And that comment period is about 6 to 12 months, depending on a variety of factors. Do you know what the comment period on this was, Glenn?
2 weeks.
30 days.
30 days.
Which again goes back to say there's an urgency of why it is they're trying to push this through. Now, I'll add something else super fun in here. So in addition, so if Freddie Mac does this, there's no reason why Fannie Mae is not going to try to do this. But they're under conservatorships, right? So how do they really expand this market? Which is, right now it's a decent sized market, but this could expand, up to, for both of those agencies, maybe 2 trillion. I've heard maybe 4 to 5 trillion with leverage of capacity. How do they extend that? Well, they could then, if the conservators, which again is FHFA and the Treasury, say, okay, you're no longer under conservatorship, they can go back to securitizing these. Does this sound familiar? That means that they take a bunch of these secondary mortgages, they package them together into a new security, and they sell them into the market. And these were the same types of securities, if you recall, which started the whole ball rolling with the Great Recession financial crisis. So nothing to see here, guys. I'm sure this will work out really well. And I'm super excited for taxpayers to back consumer loans. You're not even backing first mortgages. You're now backing consumer loans. Way to go. Really glad that the government wants to get into that.
And again, it is estimated to be $2 trillion. However, you and I both know, it could go as high as $5 trillion. Don't just think of that as your debt that we need to pay, think of it this way as well. That's $2 to $5 trillion being dumped into the economy. What do you think will happen to the value of the dollar and your buying power? $5 trillion out of thin air.
It's insane. And at a time when we have the Federal Reserve, who is frustrated with their fight their attempt to fight inflation, and the government continuing to spend like drunken sailors, no disrespect meant to the drunken sailors, then you keep having these consumer stimuluses. And this is what happened with the Biden administration when they came out, right out of the gate a few months later, and they did direct consumer stimulus. It's in the name. Stimulus. It stimulates the economy. That is the intention. And the same thing here. If you take money that is locked up in homes and all of a sudden you unlock that. And again, it's theoretical money, because if the price of houses end up going down in that area, then they could end up being underwater and be in real financial trouble. So this is theoretical dollars that they have that they're going to take out and use as dollars to spend in the economy. It artificially inflates the GDP. It makes everything look like the consumer is doing much better, and it absolutely will eat away at your purchasing power, devalue your labor, devalue your wealth. Once again, it is the same cycle repeating for political purposes.
Carol, I'd love to have you on again later this week, because there's a couple of other things that are affecting small businesses and independent workers. So you will own nothing. But you'll be happy, apparently.